Okay, we're about ready to begin. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Bazelor. I am the digital literacy librarian here at the Burbank Public Library. Welcome to today's program, How to Keep Your Kids Safe Online, Become the Chief Cybersecurity Officer of Your Family. Presenting today will be Dr. Kelley Misata, founder and chief trailblazer of Sightline Security. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so we can all enjoy this online program. You should see our speakers on the screen, our presenters. As audience members, you will not be able to speak, but you will see a question and answer button or Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Throughout the program, you're welcome to type your questions in there. We will be taking questions at the end. I will read through what we got and we'll be answering some of those. When you leave the program, you'll be redirected to an evaluation form. We would greatly appreciate it if you could fill out that form and help us improve programs in the future. So I will now turn it over to our speaker, Kelley Misata. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brian. Okay, folks, welcome. I am going to share my screen and we'll get things started. I'm also going to move my happy little Zoom window over here. So, all right, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I am Dr. Kelley Misata, and I'm excited to impart hopefully some pearls of wisdom and some new information about how children are using technology and some ways us parents can keep them safe. So let me start off with just a little bit about me. And I have quite a few slides in this presentation. I'm going to try really hard not to buzz through them too fast. But just so you know, they will be provided afterwards. So feel free to take notes or not to take notes. But you'll get the PowerPoint deck if you'd like it. So just a little bit about me. I earned my Ph.D. in cybersecurity at Purdue University. I did it quite late in life, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And it was a wonderful program because it was an interdisciplinary program that allowed me to explore a lot of different aspects of cybersecurity. I was former director of communications of the Tor project. Tor is an online anonymizing technology that allows you to mask your identity, sometimes used for nefarious purposes, but oftentimes used for people who are in situations where if their identity was revealed online, they would be persecuted or they would be put in danger in some regard. I'm also right now Chief Trailblazer and CEO of Sightline Security. I built Sightline Security actually out of my dissertation research, where I looked at the nonprofit sector and helped identify the gaps between security best practices and nonprofits working with the victims of violence. That opened up this huge idea that, wow, we can do more to help nonprofits navigate the cyber and information security space. And so I formed Sightline to help do that. I'm also senior director of open source at a wonderful organization called Correlate. And I am a cyberstalking survivor. And so I want to tell you a little bit about my story, because what it does is it helps sort of frame how I see technology and how I see the risks along with using it. And I'm so honored and thank the city of Burbank for inviting me to give this talk, because it really is near and dear to my heart. While I was working actually in California several years ago, a coworker of mine began stalking me using technology in various forms, from text messages to emails to social media. And it was really such a profound and horrible experience that reached into all these different corners of my life. I I never imagined that it was even possible. And so when people say, you know, what's it like to be a victim? What is it like to sort of sit in those shoes? I can tell you firsthand that it is indescribable how difficult it is to not only manage it from a personal side, but also to explain it to others. Because as you all know, as we hold these amazing devices in our hands, it almost feels like you're separated from the person on the other end, and yet they're always with us. So it's this weird dichotomy between the two. My personal journey led me to getting a PhD in cybersecurity, because when I reached out to law enforcement and I sought out help for this situation that extended over many years, nobody was there to help me. So for me, the solution was to go get a PhD, learn about how it all operates, understand how cybersecurity works from a technology standpoint, as well from a policy and people standpoint. And it really has been an incredible journey, and I'm proud to be here. But let's get into the heart of why you all are joining me today. So we're going to talk about how to help keep kids safe online, but I want to do it in a way that as parents and as caregivers and as other family members and friends, you're not going to tear your hair out. So we're going to talk a little bit about how this crazy thing of technology is a way of life. We'll look a little bit in some of the research, and this is so much fun because there's such great advancements in technology that whenever I get to dig into the research, it always brings up these big aha moments, which I'll share with you. We're going to discuss the true risks and some of the scary points, but we're not going to sort of dig deep into the scary stuff. I think we all have vivid imaginations about what all the bad things can happen out there. So let's actually start reframing our thinking around how to look at technology, how to look at our kids' relationship with technology, and some ways that we can have productive conversations, and how we can actually maybe do things better, not only for our kids, but for ourselves and for those around us. Because at the end of the day, whether it's your children or your family members using technology, or you, we're all in this connected world together. So my security does have an impact on the security of others. So keep that all in mind. And at the very end, I'll give you some of my favorite resources that if you have a problem or you want more information, these are some really wonderful go-to places. But let's first sort of think about, like, wrap our heads around, technology, right? It's been around forever. We have had access to amazing technology for decades. And yes, it's evolved into these things. I mean, I don't know how many of you are as old as I am, and I remember the days of those big desktop Apple II computers. I remember dot matrix printers that would go zzz, zzz, zzz across the pages. And it's amazing to think now that I have this watch where I can actually receive a phone call on, right? So the advancements of technology have just been incredible. And if we think about what's coming next, it's easy as security professionals to step back and go, oh my gosh, how are we going to keep the world secure? How are we going to help people use this technology safely, mindfully, without taking away all the good stuff about it? Because people always ask me, as a security professional and as a survivor of cyberstalking, they're like, you must not use anything. You must lock down everything. And I'm like, yeah, that's not a way to live. So the good news is that there's a way to have a relationship with technology and to use it safely while being safe and without losing your mind completely. And hopefully my slides, there we go. But at the end of the day, the internet brings these millions of unsecured computers and networks across these systems. And, it's funny, during the presentation, I'm going to give you a tidbit that is going to level up your knowledge above your kids. And I'm not sure if you've ever experienced, but sometimes, like when I'm talking to folks sort of in the generation, coming up the ranks, they're always like, "Ah, yeah, you don't know how to use that. That's for our generation." Or my children will be like, "Oh, mom doesn't know how to use that." Well, I'm going to give you some information that you can wrap your heads around that maybe you want to share with them that will level you up a little bit too. But the idea around using all these different pieces of technology, whether it's my watch to my phone to my computer, it means that we're all connected, the devices and the people. And it also means that those devices are actually talking to each other, not only in the sphere of our home or of our area or our country, but it is a global sphere. And we have to understand that information is being stored and delivered and moving not only in the United States, but out. And when that information changes those domains, the laws change with it. So we'll talk a little bit about that more when it comes to some of the risks, but it's important to understand that even though your device and you sit in one space, one of the biggest challenges in security is that the information and sort of those communication channels are flowing all over the world. And that adds this layer of complexity that can really drive us mad at the end of the day. The other thing that's really challenging for us in this new big technology world are all these crazy events happening. And we hear it in the news a lot. We hear breaches and we hear ransomware and we hear exploits and we hear zombie apocalypse when it comes to technology. And it's really overwhelming. And some of that is the media needing to put those things out in the world. Some of it is also to help educate folks to say, hey, you need to pay attention to where your data is, because sometimes if your data is compromised, that will have an effect on your life. So it's important to be informed, but again, without kind of losing our minds in the process. And kids, oh my gosh, I am stunned. It's so funny. My daughters are older and pretty much I'm an empty nester. But I remember my daughters getting their first cell phones, and I remember logging them in to Barbie.com for the first time. And I remember sort of that fear and that anxiety about, well, who are they going to be interacting with you on Webkins? If for any of those of you, I don't even know if Webkins is still around, but how do you know who your children are interacting with through this technology? And those were some of the scariest moments for me as a parent. But yet this technology and sort of our access to the information and the access to the wider network of the world is providing such a rich and wonderful learning environment for our children. It's really incredible to think about. But there are these risks and these things that we really need to take into consideration while we're doing it. And one of them is that we can't always control or see or verify who's on the other end of that device. And that's one of the things that I really want everybody to kind of wrap their heads around is that, and I experienced this personally as well, because people would say, oh, well, what is he doing? And how is he attacking you? And what are his actions? And there was a point where I got to with the stalking situation where I stepped back and said, I can't control him. I can't control those things. I can't control or predict what he's going to do. All I can do is protect me and my space. And so I've taken that to heart, and I hope you will take that to heart as well, because I think the more that we try and sort of manage and predict what's coming at us from an attack standpoint or from a cybersecurity standpoint, the more overwhelming it can feel. So let's think about what we control. But before we do that, let's take a look at some of the interesting research that and how we're using technology, because it's kind of cool. So, and these are some of the fun things that even you can do on your own to just kind of gauge where your use of technology is too. So one of the things that's really fun to think about is how many apps do you have on your cell phone? So maybe tonight before dinner, not at the dinner table, but before dinner, maybe open up your phone and count how many apps you have. And it's really incredible to think that the average user has 80 or more apps on their phone. Holy cow. And how many of those applications have you read the terms of use with? See, it's the mom look happening right there. For many of us, we see something really cool and we're like, okay, I'm going to download it on my phone, never once going into all that legal mumbo jumbo to figure out what it is we're actually signing up for. But out of all of the applications on our phone, the average user only uses about 9. So one of the things that I've often said to parents and kids, to be honest with you, is every once in a while, maybe go on your phone and delete all the ones that you don't use anymore. First of all, it'll clean things up a bit. It might even improve some performance on your phone if it's one of the ones that's running in the background all the time. But if you're not using them, get rid of them. Kind of like housekeeping or house cleaning for your phone. So, but it's amazing to think about how many applications are actually sitting on our phones. The other piece of research that I thought was really interesting was that many of those applications that we have on our phones have vulnerabilities. And I'll mention this more later, but when companies are building applications, what they're doing is they're taking this really fantastic idea and saying, oh, let's put that on an app and let's make sure it's on a mobile device that people can use all the time and we'll get lots of leverage and lots of likes and lots of all this stuff. And you know what comes last? How is it secured? How do we make sure that we're protecting people's privacy? How do we make sure that our application isn't going to get hit with some weird attack? That unfortunately has been historically part of the afterthought in software development. So even though these applications are fun and really cool to use, also remember that security and sort of that part of the equation and privacy isn't at the forefront of why companies are building those applications. It's about the user experience. So whenever an application that you're using all the time, like one that is your favorite, like pick your favorite. If you get a notice that, oh, you need an update on that particular app, do it. Because that's the one you want to be like, oh, that's the one I use all the time. And if they've sent out a new update to it, I should probably do it. So make sure you kind of keep an eye on what those updates are and make sure you update the ones of the applications you use the most. But keeping in mind that a lot of these folks, as well-intended as they are of building these wonderful applications, security and privacy are not at the forefront of that development process. So some of the others that folks are still trying to understand, sorry, I have this big screen in front of me. Some of it is that these users that are using these applications aren't concerned about, some are concerned, some aren't concerned about the personal information that they're sharing with their applications. And I'm talking about both mobile and desktop. So I have a question and you don't have to answer it unless you want to put an answer in the chat window, which I'd be really curious about. If someone asked you to sit down and write a list on a piece of paper of every platform and application that you have downloaded on your phone or used the web version on your laptop, where you had to enter in a password and your email, could you make that list? And if you could, awesome. How big is it? Is it 5 things? Is it 10 things? Is it more than 10 things? Step back and think about, oh, wow, I just gave my email and I created a password to sign up for an account for a free trial for 7 days to try this new, I don't know, fitness app, right? And then you forget about it and then you're like, oh gosh, they still have my email and my password and everything in their system. And so we always forget that, like, when we're engaging with these applications, we're actually giving away some of our personal information. Now, is that super risky? Not usually, but again, it's some of those housekeeping things that we can do where it helps us to be more secure, knowing where our information is. And one of our most valuable pieces of information is our email, right? and those passwords that we use to get into those applications. So if you have a chance tonight, just sit down and be like, I have a Zoom account. I have a Dropbox account. I have my email accounts. I have my bank accounts. Just list them all out and see where you get. And then start doing some housekeeping. But it's really interesting as users are interacting with technology more and more, and as breaches are being sort of elevated in the news, people are sort of stepping back and saying, oh, should I put that in? Should I use a different email? They're asking me for my phone number, but it's optional. So I think I'm not going to put it in this time. So it's interesting to see how people are now starting to dial back how much information they're putting into this technology space. Kids, on the other hand, not so much. They're putting a lot of themselves out there on these applications. I will tell you a small story about my daughter. I don't want to divert too much, but Instagram, I have an Instagram account. My daughters have an Instagram account, and if you're not familiar with what's called a Finsta account, it's a fake Instagram account. Kids make them so that their parents can't see their fake account, and that's where they hang out with their friends. And their public Instagram accounts where they can hang out with family members. And the content is usually very different. Well, children being children, my daughter created her Finsta account, didn't tell me, but used her name relatively in its regular form, didn't alter it any, didn't use a nickname. And what Instagram does is that it cycles through all of its accounts to say, hey, Kelley, don't you want to be matched up, or don't you want to follow this person because they look like they might know you? Well, they tried to link me to my daughter's Finsta account, and I looked at it and I went crazy. And I said to her, you need to be mindful of what you're putting out there on the internet for all the reasons we're going to talk about in a moment. But she said to me, oh my gosh, Mom, what crazy cybersecurity stuff did you do to my phone to make Instagram connect me with you? All it was the algorithm that was built into the application. It was nothing that I did. So, but she didn't realize that by using her actual name, that it triggered the algorithm to connect us. So sometimes even kids, when they're not being really smart, will come back and we can catch them doing some of the things we don't want them doing. All right, onward. So another really interesting fun fact in the research is that, and we've known this for ages, right? Whether it be toys, whether it be fads out there, the Cabbage Patch fads, remember, or technology, there are things and transitions that happen. So back in the early days with my daughters, they were very interested in Snapchat and Facebook. Right now, things are shifting away. So TikTok has risen above Facebook. And if you ask a lot of teenagers right now, if they're on Facebook, a lot of them will say, yeah, but I don't use it that often. And I think it's because there's a lot of their family members who are using it. So as more people are using social media platforms that aren't in your generational group, then I think it becomes less cool. I'm not really sure the psychological elements of that, but that's just my guess. But it is really interesting to see sort of these different trends and how different technologies are shifting from different age groups and how teenagers are starting to look to different things. And I mention this because sometimes we just try and latch on as parents to say, okay, my kid's using Facebook, so that's what I'm going to focus on. Or my kid's using Instagram, that's what I'm going to focus on. And we can't. We have to remain in lockstep with the technology and the platforms that our kids are using. And one of the great resources for that I'll also show at the end is the Pew Institute that provides a lot of this great research around what are the trends in children using technology as well as teenagers. This was another really interesting one, that about 1 in 5 teens visit or use YouTube almost constantly. Remember when YouTube was just sort of used to kind of get a quick video on how to do something, or a quick video? Now is actually this incredible source of learning, education, content, entertainment. I mean, I'm stunned at how many kids are using YouTube as sort of that go-to place more than TV, because they can get a lot of their entertainment value out of it. So YouTube, this thing that is accessible and used by many of us, is actually being used by this generation, by some of these kids, differently than when we would, which really shifts our thinking about, okay, not only are they using these platforms, but why are they using them and how are they using them comes into question. So a couple just parting notes on those few research slides. Facebook and the technologies and platforms that we think that kids are using may not be the ones that they're using. So keep in mind on that. And also keep in mind that they're using these platforms for different purposes than we think they might be using them for. So this adds to that complexity. And I promise this is the only scary slide, and it's really not that scary. But I think the hardest part about helping to navigate kids to being safe online is that our view of the world and the scary elements of out there is different than theirs. And we will always kind of look at the world through our own eyes and our own experiences. And, I know that my daughters understand my journey in this space, and they understand that I will always interact and see technology differently than they will. But what we can do is sort of help them understand that there are some nefarious actors out there, but there are ways that we can protect ourselves from them without getting scared and without panicking. But for lots of kids, they're getting things like these phishing attacks, which may not be a directed sort of targeted attack at them. Kids, because they're so willing to click on things, sometimes we'll get a text message like this and they'll click on it. And then what you have is that you have an infiltration of malware or some other infiltration by an attacker into that system. And if they're using your phone, if they're using somebody else's phone, if they're connecting their phones to devices that are connected to your work environment, then it becomes a problem. So again, it's not just these devices kind of on their own. Every single one of these is connected to other things. And so if we are mindful about clicking on things like this or interacting with a potential attacker, we put those other things at risk. So just a quick note on this. This was actually from my telephone. And people say to me, okay, well, that looks scary. What can I do about it? And I'm going to just run through this super quick, but we can always follow up with another conversation about it. So I look at this and the first thing I'm like, okay, yes, I have an Amazon account. Okay, we'll see what that's about. The order number looks legitimate, but it's a link. Okay, so that could be something on Amazon I bought. The amount looks like it has tax in it, so it's not like a flat number that looks suspicious. So far I'm like, okay, so this has an air of legitimacy. Will be debited from your credit card isn't the way I would think Amazon would phrase that. So that seemed a little off to me. And contact this phone number if it was not initiated by you. So I looked at this, I was like, okay, so there's enough of this to be weird. So the first thing I did, went on Amazon. Is there anything pending? Are there any orders that I've made that either match that amount, match that order number? Is there anything there? Nope, check that box, great. To be doubly safe, I went on to my credit card that's associated with my Amazon account. Check that, was there any charges? Were there any like weird charges? Like I didn't just look for this number. I just looked for other things that might look weird. Nothing. Okay. this is a scam. I'm going to delete it and move on with my life. Now, folks that I know in my life also, because they hate these things, they'll say, okay, I'm going to click on the phone number and I'm going to tell these guys to knock it off. Well, that seems like a pretty good idea, except for the fact what the attackers want from you in a situation like this is for you to engage. They want to know, are you going to play along? If you click the number, you automatically are sort of pinned as a phone number that will play along. So the best course of action, if you validate that it is a scam, delete it and move on with your life. But kids sometimes will see this and go, oh my gosh, what's this? I'm going to click a 9. So teaching our children to just sort of take a pause and say, does that looks weird. What is that? Or wait till you get home and ask your parents is a really good course of action for children to take if they were to get something like this. Now, ransomware is one of the attack vectors that's out there, and we're hearing a lot about. Folks are thinking, oh, well, teenagers wouldn't be hit with ransomware. Well, you know what? It's not the people necessarily. There are some targeted ones that are going after specific groups, specific companies, absolutely. But a general sort of wide sweeping ransomware attack would hit a device, not necessarily a person. So even though your kids may not have anything of value or anything of perceived value, they need to understand that even these other attack vectors, they are, by using technology, they are vulnerable for. And so that's a really good conversation starter to have with your kids too. I always love asking children, I'm like, what does that word ransomware mean? Like, can you describe it for me? And when they do, they're actually really intuitive. It's almost like you can see those little sponges of their brains picking up all this information that they're reading about or hearing about in the news. And that's really exciting. The challenging thing is that most of the ransomware attacks are coming through malware and through some other more advanced attack vectors. But we're not going to dive too deep into that. I want to make sure that we have some time so I can give you some tips. Because at the end of the day, I know it would be so easy just to be like, oh, can we just live in a dream state where we don't have any technology? I mean, the number of times that I would love to go sit on my yoga mat on an island somewhere in the Caribbean just sounds so amazing. But unfortunately, our relationship with technology is a part of our daily lives. And as someone who tried to live without it, when my stalker was at the worst, I tried to get rid of my phone and my email and tried to live without it. It was absolutely impossible. So we have to sort of get out of this headspace of, blissful ignorance. Our kids look happy, everything looks great, to understanding that when our children are interacting with technology, cell phones, internet, platforms, the internet, laptops, tablets, anything, they are actually putting themselves at risk, and we can do things better to help them be more mindful and be stewards of their own security. Because I know as a parent, we're always looking out for them. Are they eating right? Are they sleeping? Do they have good friend groups? Are they using technology well? Are they prepared for their futures? All of these really big things that adding one more thing, I understand is feels very, very overwhelming. So let me give you some new ways of thinking about it. One, by using technology, we are consenting to the terms of agreement, okay? That unfortunately is a reality. So when people get upset that their data has been breached and they're like, well, why wasn't I protected? What I always do, frankly, is I go back into those terms of agreement and say, okay, how did they say they were going to protect me? Did they abide by their own rules? Most of the time they are, but it's still really hard. But teaching our children that by downloading that application, you are making a contract. You are saying, I agree to you having my email or my screen name, my credit card, my phone number, all the things that you share over with them, you are agreeing and consenting to. But there's other things that we can do to kind of reframe our thinking. And this was the one that really got me. So when I am using technology, and I touched upon this earlier, it was really like, okay, I know sort of my space in the world, and I remember corded telephones, and I remember life before the internet. Well, my mom doesn't. My mom is someone who remembers life even before all that. And so she uses technology with that in her head. Like, okay, it was really hard to understand how you can interact with folks with social media in those early days of Facebook. It took a lot to sort of help my mom and her generation understand that you could have a conversation on text message. How many of your parents or folks in the older generations, how many of them write text messages that are super, super long? I have family members who write super long text messages. I'm like, oh, that's more of an email than a text message. But the way they use technology and they see it is all driven by their experiences from the past, right? Same with our children. So with my children, when they discovered the stalking situation, I held it from them for many, many years. Uh, when I revealed it to them, when we talked through it, they realized that, oh, that's why mom was so worried about us being on Barbie.com. Oh, that's why mom was so worried about us interacting on Facebook. It was because I had a mindset of my own experiences that I was bringing in with them. But you know what they said to me? They said, Mom, this is our friend group. You used to go to the mall to go shopping. We hang out with our friends in social media. And that was a huge shift for me because I lived in a world of, I want to make sure that I see the person that I'm interacting now with online so that I know who that person is. And my daughter's generation is fine not knowing who the other people are at the other end of that device. And it is a comfort zone that comes with their interaction and their history with using technology. But it was such a huge aha for me because instead of like going down a checklist of don't do this, do this, do this, don't do this kind of thing, I actually stepped back and said, huh, I should really think about the value of technology in your life through your eyes. It's your friend group, it's your validation, it's how you're connecting about homework, it's how you're making plans to go to concerts and do other things. And these are the things that are important to kids. And it's how they know they can always reach me and the rest of the family if they have an emergency. Those things, I mean, I remember leaving the house and my father saying, do you have a quarter in your pocket in case you need to make a phone call? I'm totally dating myself now, but these were the things that sort of hit me hard over my journey in security because all of a sudden I understood that it's all about the generations. Okay, so I can give you lots of do's and don'ts. I'm going to give you a few in a moment. But really, I think the core of keeping our kids safe online is about understanding that their generation is going to see it and use it differently. The more that we can get into that space with them, the easier it's going to be to help to keep them safe. So a little bit more pieces of research because it was fun. 54% of teens say it'd be hard to give up social media. Okay, and I know as parents, we're always looking for ways to kind of barter and say, okay, well, if you're not going to do your homework, you're not going to get your laptop tonight, or you're not going to be able to go on Facebook or TikTok. But it's really, really hard. And for a lot of kids, this is so much a part of the cadence of their days and their social groups and kind of the bigger universe of their lives. Again, this is another one of, these are the different platforms that the kids are using with YouTube at the top. Facebook is falling down the line a little bit, but YouTube, TikTok, I will admit I've never been on TikTok, but I hear it's a really cool thing. Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, all those things are kind of going by the wayside. But this is something good. Like you could log into the Pew Institute, just look at their research, and there's other research groups. You can look at that like once a year and say, I'm wondering what the latest like platform for my kids are. That could give you some really great conversation starters. But, and I know I keep beating the source, it's how they see the technology. I'm going to try and fast forward a few things. All right, so here's some great tips. And these are ways that you can start the conversation with your kids. Whenever I've said to a group of teenagers, and when I've done this talk live, and I'll be with the kids, I'll be like, hey, can I see your phone? Most of them are willing to hand it right over. And then if you say, okay, if we made a book of all of the text messages you've ever sent to everyone in your phone, would you want that handed over to your family? Would you let people see that? And then they're like, oh no, you can't look at that because that's private. But setting up that relationship with your kids to say, hey, can I see your phone? You know, with the understanding of I'm still going to respect your privacy, but I just kind of want to see what applications you're running, because I went to this weird thing with Dr. Kelley Misata, and she said that we're using only 9 apps out of 80 on our phones. Let's maybe clean some out. Technology was not built with privacy and security in mind. That's a great thing to mention to kids. And most of them be like, okay, so what? We can't be private anyway. I've heard a million excuses, but it's important for them to understand that, because if something were to go bad, then we can blame the technology companies to a degree, but it wasn't built for that. And we actively engaged with the technology freely. Except we don't know what we don't know. We won't always be able to predict what's coming down the line when it comes to technology. We also won't be able to predict what's coming down the line with attackers. So even though we would want to be able to go, knock on Facebook's door and say, hey, you've got to fix this problem, or why aren't you protecting me? It's not always the holy grail of a great resolution. As someone who knows, when my attacker used Facebook as one of his channels to harass me and harass everyone in my life, I submitted 75 different accounts of abuse to Facebook. 75 in like a 2-week time period. Guess how many responses I got back from Facebook? 0. But talk about that generational gap. My parents would look at Facebook and say, they should protect you. You should be able to call Facebook and they should take it down and they should do. And the kids are like, yeah, Facebook isn't going to do anything to protect us. So who's going to protect them? So this is where we're going to put on a little bit of a tinfoil hat, not a big one, just a little one. And I'm going to run through just a couple of really, really quick things, I promise. In fact, I'm going to buzz through a couple of these slides because I want to get to 2 important things. Okay, so this is where you get to level up on your kids, okay? We talk about this a lot at Sightline when we're working with nonprofit organizations. What's the difference between cybersecurity and information security? It's always the big question. What's the difference? Are they the same? Are they different? What are the differences? They're different, but sort of the same. I know, confusing. Let me break it down. Information security is the security of a what? A thing, right? Like a name, an email, a password, a photograph, right? Something that you can almost wrap your arms around. So when we're talking about our kids and helping them to stay safe, we kind of want to talk to them about the securing of their information themselves in that digital space. Because security is the security of the where, cyberspace. That's much, much harder for people to wrap their heads around, and for people to really be like, who do I call? Who's going to help me to figure out what to do in cyberspace? Well, but if I'm working on protecting my information is sitting over here, I can protect that space. So protect the information. Understand that it sits in the digital space, cyberspace. And that'll help break it down a little bit. So as you're talking to your kids about keeping themselves safe online, try and keep your headspace out of that cyberspace and keep it in the physical realm. And that's why at Sightline, we really do press many of our organizations to focus on securing of the what, the information, securing of those things. Okay. As you're thinking about keeping your kids safe online, what you really want to do is understand, how will you know ahead of time if something is off or going bad? We as parents have usually an intuition around, oh, they're not eating well, they're not sleeping well, they seem grumpy all the time, what's going on? We can do that, but you can also do that with technology, and you'd be like, hey, it kind of seems like you're on your phone a lot. So think to yourself, like, this is kind of incident response planning. If you're in a company that has a cybersecurity program, how would you know ahead of time if something was going bad? So think through those steps. Can you be there to help without panicking or, dismissing what they're going through? Because lots of times when kids are interacting with their friends through these devices, it's as real as someone standing across the table from them. So understand that even though it's through device, it's still in the teenagers and in the kids realm. It's as real as if the person is standing live with them. How will you address what needs to be done? So if something's going bad, if your child is struggling, what resources do you have? Sometimes having those at the ready will be a huge help. I remember when things started going bad for me, I was like, where do I start? How do I get started? So having even just a couple of those websites ready to be like, oh gosh, how do I navigate this, is great. And recover and learn. So it is likely your children will have some sort of terrible experience with technology, undoubtedly. How will you recover and learn from it? How will they become better digital citizens as a result of that event? And so as you think through just these 4 questions, that will help you prepare and get ready for what comes next. It's almost like when we get ready, we know our kids are going to fall down, they're going to scrape their knees. So I'm going to have in my hall closet my first aid kit with the Neosporin and the Band-Aids of all sizes ready to go. That's what you want to do to help keep your kids safe online, is to have that emergency preparedness kit ready to go. Some of it's your own headspace, some of it is resources that you can reach out to. The other thing to keep in mind is that the security of our kids impacts the security of everyone in the family and all the folks that they're connected to. And I know that can be an overwhelming thought. So I'm going to leave that one for you to noodle on, because there is a lot of overwhelm going on and I totally understand it. But I'm going to fast forward to a couple other things that I want to make sure. So we leave about 5 minutes for any questions. One is, staying safe online is an imperfect effort. So embrace imperfection. I'm so proud of earning a PhD. I'm so proud of the work I do in security. And yet I know that I am not perfect when it comes to security. I know there are things that I could probably do better. So embrace that. With your kids, start with have a conversation. The best thing to do is, and it doesn't have to be like a big formal sit down. It could be driving in the car, as we all know, it's one of the best times to talk to your kids. Driving in the car, just make it really, informal, just check in and kind of cool. Like if you're talking to a teenager, if you're talking to someone almost going off to college, and say, how do you define security or privacy in your life? Like, can you describe to me what it means to be private? And that is always illuminating, because they, again, are using this technology so differently than we are. And have those different life experiences that they're not going to find it the same. But the answers to this question, particularly if you have teenagers, this answer will help you understand ways to keep them safe because you'll be in their headspace. Instead of just saying, here are all the things you don't do. And they're like, well, why does that matter to me? It doesn't fit anything that relates to me. This question will help get you there. You can say, hey, wow, that looks interesting. That looks like an interesting site you're at. What do you like about it? Like, tell me about it. Describe it. Like, my daughters love to educate me about all the cool things that they were doing. And occasionally I would play dumb. I'd be like, oh, so how does that work? And like, who's that person that you're talking to? Like, what are your favorite games that you play online? I've never heard of that one. Can I watch you play it? Can you teach me how to play it? By the way, I'm really terrible at Guitar Hero, but we'll leave that for another time. But what's your favorite part of it? It's like connecting with our kids and learning about the stuff that they are using on their phones and on their devices. You know how we've talked about not talking to strangers? Well, have you ever thought about the fact that some people who are online might be strangers too? And this is where I promise you will probably get an eye roll. They'll be like, oh, really? Really? Don't get scared. Don't worry. I know who they are. They're good people. Well, they might be good people, but we can't always know who they are. So you don't always know that's a kid. It might be an adult. You don't know it's always, where they're living. What are they doing? Why are they using that tool? Why are they on that game? Keeping that sort of stranger danger kind of mindset when they're using technology is important. And if you get a chance to sort of watch over their shoulders and sort of see what they're doing, you can start looking at some of those folks that they're interacting with and maybe ask some questions about it. Like, why did that guy do that thing on that platform? Talk to me about it. And then you start learning who their online social group is. The more you can connect with, who are your friend groups online? Who are you talking to online? Really helps you to understand they've got their friend groups in person, they have their friend groups online, and they may not be the same. So, a few more tips. Keep technology up to date. When you get patches, tell your kids, like, honestly, teach them that when your phone says to update the operating system, you got to do it. This is not an opt-in, opt-out kind of thing. So you got to do. So the more you instill those behaviors, talk about privacy and security and talk about from your own perspective. Say, hey, I know that we see the world differently, but this is how I see my privacy. And this is, like I got this weird email. This is how I handled it. Talk to them openly about it. Set habits for better security. Like, okay, so soon they're not going to be changing the clocks for daylight savings. I guess it's happening next year. I used to say to people, whenever the clocks change the passwords on your most critical accounts, like your bank account. And for kids, it would be, hey, the clocks are changing. We get an extra hour, or we're losing an hour. Why don't we go into all your favorite applications on your phone and just update your passwords? But find that moment in time that you can say, hey, it's time to change passwords again. Let's do it together. Be a little paranoid. As parents, we're really good at that. So I'm not going to beat that horse. Keep an eye out for anything weird. The thing that I regret most about my own personal journey is that I could feel in my gut that that person didn't fit, wasn't right, wasn't a good person. And I didn't listen to my intuition. Even though everything he did through technology, I knew it wasn't right. And when I get weird text messages, my stomach still turns. So keep in tune to your intuition, keep an eye out for anything weird, and trust your gut. Learn about social media platforms, and I will take this one on myself. I will go learn about TikTok, and be forgiving of them and yourself. Something will happen. I hope it's not too terrible, but when it does, help them learn from it and help yourself learn from it and pass it on to others. But most importantly, make sure that if something goes weird or if you run into an event with your child and concerned about their safety online, take a pause, take a breath, because if you can do that, then you will be in a better headspace to reach out to the resources that can help you and really unpack what's going on so you can make good decisions. So I know that was like, but I'll stick around for questions. Here are some great resources: Common Sense Media, CyberWise, I Keep Safe, and the Pew Institute are all fantastic resources to start with. But again, the biggest message: get to know your kids and how they see technology. Those conversations are the best. So Brian, do we have some questions?
We do. Thank you to everyone who put questions in the Q&A. There's still time to do so if you have them. We can jump right into some of these. So we have, how do you recommend parents check on their kids' app usage?
Oh, you can go, well, if they're using an iPhone, you can go on the iPhone and you can see what applications that they're using. Also, kids have a tendency of organizing their phones. Some of them do it in folders so that you can see which ones they're using the most often.
We have another question. Are there statistics on which age groups are most at risk?
Depends on at risk for what.
That's an excellent question.
So I'm
There,
sorry to be, so Pew has some great research. You have to understand that the risk comes with how they're using technology and where they are in their social journey. So when they say at risk for bullying, well, that sort of falls in line when then they're going to school and they're in social environments. When it's like how at risk with technology, it's how they're using it. Like babies who are in strollers using their parents' phone, the biggest risk is that they're going to click on something they shouldn't. The biggest risk for teenagers is that they're going to be interacting with someone nefarious online.
is there a website geared towards kids and teens to teach them about, sorry, give me a second. To teach them about information security?
There's lots. So there's Common Sense Media is always my go-to place, and it's for parents, and there's lots of great content there for kids too. So PBS also has some great content for kids of all ages, so you can dive into those. There's an abundance of great information about helping kids. The challenge always is to get them to want to do it. So whenever you can find sort of that genre, or if your kids are into games, if they're into online stuff, plug into where their interests are and you can find the resources that will match it. But there's lots of great content out there. Common Sense Media is always my go-to.
What resources were helpful to you when you were being stalked?
Great question. Not a lot. It was really challenging. It's around 2009, 2010 timeframe. So now we're 12 years later. There wasn't a lot, and it was really challenging because the victims of cyber stalking and cyber harassment have always been sort of in that position of having to prove it, and then you can go get the help. So it's been, that part is really difficult to answer. What I would say though is that what I learned in that process, and sort of the help I got in piecemeal, was how to take the control away from him, bring it to me, and step into, okay, really defining what privacy is for me, and then working with the tools that I use all the time, like my email and other things, to actually set up the privacy controls that fit for me so I could feel safe using them. So there wasn't like one just sort of source of education. It was really piecemeal for me back in those days. And if you want to do a PhD, go for it, but it was really hard. It was really hard.
I imagine so, but we're all grateful that you do have that. And I really want to thank you for your time, Dr. Misata. This was very eye-opening. I think I speak for all of us when I say this is very helpful, and we're going to bring this to our kids and to all the parents in our lives. Um, so before we finish for the afternoon, I'd like to just let everyone know if I can put a final slide up to conclude. Uh, oh, actually, one last comment. The crowd wants to thank you for your time. They're very grateful.
Thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. And I hope you had some good tidbits to take away. There's lots of do's and don't lists out there. I try to avoid it. So hopefully you got something good.
Thank you. So we're going to post a link to our survey in the chat. This is the library survey. I'm just trying to get a feel for what kind of programs you'd like to see in the future and other whatnot. If you'd like to talk about this program, if you want to really show your support for Dr. Misata and all the other digital literacy stuff we have out there and all the children's services we have here, hit up that survey, let us know. If you have any questions about future programs, you can always check our online calendar. Is there anything you'd like to plug, Doctor?
Nope. Sightline security would help nonprofits. And honestly, my biggest plug is that if you see someone who is in crisis and scared because of something that's happening on technology, please believe them, give them the space to talk about it, and go find some resources to help them. That's it.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks,
Have a
everybody. Thanks,
wonderful.
Brian.
Thank you.